Today we're comprehensively reviewing another one. Not just the newer version of the T4 Kaleid, but another pair, another duo, another set of GameSir controllers, as it seems that's the way they like to drop these bad boys. Kind of an accountability buddy, if you will. You got the GameSir G7 and SE variant, the Cyclone and Cyclone Pro, and the Nova and Nova Lite. In this video, I want to directly compare these two brand new models from GameSir with its predecessor, the foundation that these two controllers are built on, the still great T4 Kaleid. Without further ado, let's get it. A quick disclaimer for my audience, the Stallions and Stallionettes, these controllers were sent for review, but this is going to be an honest, comprehensive review. I haven't been paid or told to say anything about them. GameSir doesn't get an early preview, and these thoughts are 100% my own. So if there's any cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement, you're going to hear about it. So these companies make better products over time. So on the GameSir website, the big headliner here is going to be the GameSir Kaleid series. When you click on order now, it's going to break you out into two models, the Kaleid and Kaleid Flux. Notice neither of these are going to be the typical T4 that's been around for over a year. And a massive point of confusion, if you just Amazon search GameSir Kaleid, it's going to take you to the T4 listing, and this will continue to be the case for quite some time until the stock of these older units, the original T4 Kaleid, dries up. And also, I really don't like the naming convention, as I do believe it introduces more confusion to the model lineup that needs to be, considering this is the exact name of a previous controller, the Kaleid, however they removed the T4. Not much of a difference in the naming convention, and then you get down to the core fundamental features and notice that not a lot has really changed feature-wise. Furthermore, I do strongly believe, I'm going to get this sentiment or statement out of the way right up front, that the Flux variant should not exist, and this should only be one controller, which should have a different name, perhaps the Kaleid 2 or the Kaleid Plus, maybe a brand new name that's not Kaleid. Considering the differences are so slim, and we are going to go down the line what the differences are exactly, I do not believe the Flux should even exist, because the main feature or difference is that this has membrane switches as opposed to mechanical, and the RGB lighting isn't really red, green, blue, or multicolored, but a static color. Also, the PCB or printed circuit board looks a little bit cooler with a topographic design or pattern, and those are separated by $3. And this leads me to the fact that I just made a buyer's guide about 4 months ago for GameSir, and since then, 5 new controllers have entered that lineup, making this product page as confusing as ever. But something to keep in mind, the T4 Kaleid is no longer in production. GameSir's not making them fresh or anything like that. Just the Kaleid and Kaleid Flux. So any T4s you see rolling around are going to be on Amazon, Walmart. If your local Walmart stocks GameSir, usually not. Generally, PDP and PowerA products are on the shelves of Best Buy and Walmart. But I'm going to get the differences right out of the way right up front. And yes, we are going to compare each part or component on the table or desk, things like the Dpad, face buttons, to the previous version. The main difference is that these now sport magnetic Hall effect thumbstick modules that are far less likely to develop stick drift for you. You still can't have a recentering spring, lose tension on you, not nearly as common as the multiple points of failure of potentiometer thumbsticks. Other than that, these are identical to the T4 Kaleid that I reviewed and liked quite a goddamn bit. With all the time, energy, and money that GameSir put into these two controllers, the Flux and the Kaleid, I do believe it should be one new wireless Pro Kaleid controller. Sorry, I'm stuttering like an old Buick right now. William Shatner speaking or whatever, but I do strongly believe that there just should have been a wireless version of the T4 Kaleid with a couple of more pro features like trigger stops or locks. Since the Kaleid is the highest end version, the Flux is its little brother, we're going to focus on the landing page of the Kaleid, as that's going to have all the key features that these bad boys sport. The main one's going to be these magnetic Hall effect thumbstick modules, rated for 5 million cycles. Hall effect analog triggers, not nearly as much as a selling factor as having analog thumbsticks, because this isn't as common of a point of failure. Also, what they're getting at here or claiming,
what are you playing at?
Is that when you're modulating the trigger, maybe you're playing a racing game and you're on the throttle and brake, movements as precise or small as 0.1 millimeters should be registered. So several notches or steps will be registered through those triggers is what they're getting at there. And then GameSir's going for these hybrid sticks that have that membrane feeling where it, feels a little bit, for lack of a better word, squishy or mushy, or as they like to call it because it sounds better, like a selling feature, cushioned. It's cushioning the blow, but really they feel like they blow. Now these are rated for 5 million clicks, and you can't see any rubber plunger mechanism under there like a typical membrane switch, which you do see on the Flux. So this is a better, more typical mechanical switch versus a hybrid. Still has a membrane plunger in there, although they are still claiming that these are cushion buttons, more on the feeling of actuating them on the desk during the face button section. But those are rated for 5 million clicks, have a little more than half a millimeter of press, and an actuation force of this many plus 10 girlfriends. Full RGB lights on the Kaleid, but not on the Flux, which is a single solid color. And this is funny, realistic and immersive haptic sensation as they show a picture of typical Rumble Force motors, which are not haptic motors. You have your typical Rumble Force motors, then you have your Rumble Force HDs, like what we just saw the other day, and then you've got haptic feedback motors, for example, what you're going to see in the DualSense controller, which get not only higher peak strength to really rumble the shit out of your hand, but also a lot more accurate as they can reproduce thousands of effects on your palms. These typical Rumble Force motors can't. They're just these metal fins that spin around. They're counterbalances, basically. You've got bigger stack over here, littler stack over here. They're claiming there's haptic sensation here. No, that's a Rumble Force motor, big dog. But one thing that is accurate is the fact that you can't adjust the vibration strength motor in the software, which is the GameSir Nexus, not to be confused with Gamers Nexus, the YouTube channel. By holding down the multifunction button, you can activate the trigger stops, which are just software based, not actual legit real trigger stops. And you can change the effect, dim and disable the lights on the fly, which is sick if you don't want to use the app. And you can also swap between 4 onboard profiles, although one of them is a default, so technically it's 3 customizable profiles. We know this is never going to change, so in every review we're going to have a quick little laugh about it. Universal compatibility, which no, not really. It's actually one console, in this case Xbox, and then PC, although it is Linux, SteamOS over here, and then Windows 10 or 11. No Mac support listed here. But with the use of converters or adapters, we are going to try and get these puppies working on PlayStation and Switch. Although keep in mind, since these are wired controllers, we're still going to go tethered. As for the packaging, included accessories, it's identical to all GameSir models recently. The inner box has GameSir hole punched or stamped out in the top. If you wanted to pause to read some of the key features, you may do so now. You are going to have 2 different colors of USB-C cables that are luckily braided and really high quality. Pretty surprising for budget or entry-level gamepads, although these are wired, so it is important that the included cable is high quality, considering you're going to be using it for more than just charging. And the top does let you know to pull to unbox. Let's do that now. So it's like a tamper seal pull tab. You just pull it and bam, it pops the biscuits out of the box. Also a little piece of foam up top holding your controller in place. Love to see that. Top of the Flux has this topographical pattern, which will match the PCB or printed circuit board. And then over here, just in game, which is their catchphrase or slogan. All of your documentation's held in this little baggie. Then you have a GameSir branded Velcro tieback, no dust covers on the USB A or C end. Little bit of GameSir branding on the plastic bits. This is pretty lightweight and flexible, not on the level of the Razer mice with their HYPR cables, I believe they're called, which you can use for controllers as well, by the way. But this is a great stock cable. Contents of the box are identical. You are going to have your Game Pass Ultimate subscription, which I'm going to scratch off and give to y'all in just a minute. You do have your holographic sticker. Looks pretty goddamn cool. You do have a microfiber wiping cloth, which is going to be for the front faceplate, as these look nothing like I thought or expected. From pictures and videos and even looking at the box, it looks like the front faceplate is clear, completely clear, like the original T4 Kaleid, but they're not. They're like this black smoked. I don't like this as much. This is going to collect even more fingerprints, and look at this, there's micro scratches, little swirls around there, and this isn't some kind of a protective sticker or anything. This came like that. Those are manufacturing defects. Where you find Stallions and Stallionettes, and to whoever makes these cards, the ink is kind of running on these bad boys. The font is like bleeding together, so maybe different inks or something. This little 3-piece pamphlet has a plug for their socials. You can also join their community Discord. Is anybody part of the GameSir Discord? What do they talk about in there? Little thank you for buying the product, and then a QR code with Chinese characters you can scan. These little guitar picks are actually QC pass placards, meaning somebody actually put hands on this and supposedly made sure that a face button wasn't stuck in or something like that. Now the Kaleid and Flux do share the same instruction manual, which luckily this is folded to the right page. In previous GameSir manuals, it's been folded to like Deutsch or whatever. This, you know, it just detected that I'm an English individual and calibrated it for my North American buns. Scanning this QR code should in essence take you to a software manual where you can pinch and zoom, maybe have color pictures. As for cosmetics or appearance, the Flux and the Kaleid Flux are identical other than the D-pad color, and bumper and trigger suite being this brass or bronze as opposed to this darker gray. So I'm going to set you down and compare what I think is the better looking of the two versions with the original T4 Kaleid over there. The Flux, which is the version I dislike more from a performance standpoint for having those membrane buttons, I think cosmetically looks better than the standard, although both of them pale in comparison to the original T4 Kaleid, which I think looks phenomenal. You have this clear faceplate, white, also the RGB bleeds through in such a sick looking manner. The only thing that really throws off the looks has been addressed with the new models, and that is the multicolored face buttons. I also do think that the printed circuit board looks cooler with that topographical pattern on there, but I really hate the fact that both of these have this dark smoked faceplate, which just kicks back glare in your face and doesn't really show off the internals or guts as cool as the clear version of the original T4 Kaleid. As for the ergonomics or comfort, the original T4 Kaleid was a freakishly comfortable controller, as it uses basically the shape and shell design of an Xbox One or Series controller, but you have a little bit of dots or stippling back here for grip, and two rear buttons sunk flush with the rear shell that don't cut into comfort negatively at all. Now the new version, it felt like the palm grips right here were cocked out at a little bit more aggressive at an angle, but that's got to be some kind of a placebo effect, or I'm popping crazy pills, because I couldn't get any measurable proof with my soft measuring tape. So the only thing I can deduce here, deuce all over all of us, is that the plastics feel a little bit better on the original T4 Kaleid, as this feels just a touch more comfortable in hand, but shape and shell design, it's the same controller. It just, in my brain to my fingertips, the original T4 Kaleid feels a half a point mo better. But I'm gonna give ergos and comfort for the entire suite of Kaleid controllers, all three of them, a 9 out of 10. They are super comfortable. I just personally wish they had a pro version of the Kaleid that had rubber grips. For being budget or entry-level pads, these don't feel cheap. None of the parts or components scream out, I'm gonna crap out on you in the next couple of months. There's no weird panel gaps where the front faceplate and rear shell meet. There is a 3.5mm headphone jack under there. Crazy, huh? A little bit of a relic. But I did notice some pretty large panel gaps on the $180 Hex Phantom I just reviewed, so it's kind of refreshing to not have any of those eyebrow-raising concerns. On a sub $60 controller, if you do have any issues, you do have 1 year of standardized warranty coverage with GameSir, extendable by 6 months if you are still within the 1 year of warranty coverage you register online, which does also open up your bottom to start getting railed by marketing emails from GameSir until you unsubscribe, which doesn't stop your extended warranty. As for the D-pad or direction buttons, this isn't mentioned anywhere on the landing page, instruction manual, and this might be the only review or comparison of these controllers to make note of this. The face buttons are touted on the landing page as being different between the Flux and the standard edition. Note the old school T4 Kaleid also had those mechanical switches. However, there are 3 different D-pads amongst these controllers. You have a really tight tactile membrane in the T4 Kaleid, a mechanical clicky bit in the new Kaleid, and then a super hollow, floaty, squishy new membrane design. So good membrane, bad membrane, decent mechanical. First place with the original T4 Kaleid, second place with the Clicky John, and this is the fucking horrible D-pad. As for the face or action buttons, the Kaleid and the old school T4 Kaleid have the same mechanical switches. I'm basing this on the fact that the tech specs are virtually unchanged between the models, and also I had to engage the macro lens, but you can see the little pedestal or base is identical to the T4 Kaleid, which we'll see better during a teardown or disassembly in a future video. I've always been a big fan of the GameSir mechanical buttons, which are also in the G7. They're very tactile, clicky, have a nice resistance. They definitely lean more on the side of being harder to press than too light where you're getting false actuation. Big fan of these. Cosmetically, I think the new Kaleid does look better than the multicolored face buttons. Over here on the Flux, these actually feel worse than a stock controller's membrane buttons, and they also sound really hollow and tinny. Yeah, if you're spamming that, that's going to sound real shitty. But it's cool that they have the option, because some gamers do prefer a membrane switch. However, I do find it relatively offensive that that's the only main key notable difference between these two. Or these two, I should say. And to cause more confusion, these two new models share the name of the previous bad boy. I'm going to give the mechanical face or action buttons, these two right here, an 8 out of 10. And I'm going to give the membrane buttons a 4 out of 10. As for the accessory button suite, it is identical on these puppies, except for the home button, which used to be the old cockle-doodle-doo, how do you do, GameSir logo, and now it is the Xbox logo. They've always had the branding. This was an official licensed Xbox product, but they just decided to go with the GameSir logo. On the home button, you do have this little menu or mode button, which in combination of D-pad presses will do onboard functions such as controlling the lights. All of these do sport a 3.5mm headphone jack, which I didn't notice any hum, whir, buzz, or abnormally low volume. And the mic worked with all these. I like that there's a share button on all these. It makes sharing screenshots and game clips a lot quicker on the Xbox side of the house. And no real complaints with the pause button. However, the options or select button, whatever the hell you want to call it over here, if you have a control freak or some kind of heightened cap on the left stick, you kind of have to reach up and over at a weird way to hit this button. In the original T4 Kaleid, this was a membrane switch, and on both of the new versions, it is now mechanical. or at least feels mechanical. Tactile as shit. Clicky. I'm gonna give the accessory button suite a 7 out of 10. Now, as for the thumbsticks, this is another difference that I didn't see noted anywhere, and a lot of other, probably all other reviews aren't gonna make note of this, but there are anti-friction rings on the new version, as we're on the OG original gamer T4 Kaleid over here. You're just grinding along the front faceplate when you're out full lock on the outside of your thumbstick gates. Biggest note here is the two new models have Hall effect thumbsticks, far less likely to get stick drift for you. The only KontrolFreeks that'll slide on are the PS4 and 5 variant and the Nintendo Switch Pro variant, which was so tight that I felt like I was gonna bust the thumbstick caps. Even the PS4 and 5 ones are very tight, but you don't feel like you're causing as much damage. Xbox ones, too small. Over here in Gamepad Tester with the new Kaleid, not the Flux or the T4, and it's snapping back to a perfect resting value of 0.0002, and we're also sub 1% in the average error rate, which we love to see. How about the old school T4 Kaleid with the potentiometer thumbstick modules? What did she look like? How about a refresher course on that? Didn't look much different, snapping back to a perfectly calibrated resting value right out of the box. Average error rate, also sub 1 percentile with the old school potentiometer thumbstick modules. The Flux definitely has a different PCB or printed circuit board. Not only can we see that, but also it's the only one of these three controllers when you plug in, it doesn't just work plug and play. You also need to hit the home button. It works plug and play, but you need to turn it on, I should say. But the two new versions have the Hall effect joints, the old school T4 Kaleid potentiometer, but still perform great. The bumpers have been revised on the two new models, but unfortunately it is for the worse as they're a little bit smaller and also sound and feel so much worse to actuate. Let me fix the exposure, hold on. Make my hand look a little bit more natural. So these are tiny. If you have larger hands, you might reach up and over with the tip and not actually actuate these, but with the meat, they are actuated pretty easily, just don't sound very good. These are identical, no difference between the bumpers here. The original sounds a lot more taut and secure and also takes a little bit more resistance to actuate, so I actually prefer the original T4 Kaleid mode in the bumper department. Trigger's still the same scenario where you don't have a physical trigger lock or stop system with a lever where you can engage and disengage a mouse click, but you have a software system which allows you to shoot your gun basically as soon as you press the trigger, but you still have all this dead end take up or slop, so it's not as fast as spam shooting a semi-automatic gun, and it's really not the same feeling or level of efficiency as having physical trigger locks or stops. All three of these models have the identical dots or stippling up top, which does look a little bit cooler on the bronze, but cosmetics aside, they do provide a good amount of grip on the triggers, also good range of motion, good travel, feels like a nice resistance, but there's now those Hall triggers, which don't feel any different, but should give you up to 0.1 nanometers of accuracy. I'm gonna go ahead and give the bumpers a 4 out of 10, as I like them less than the OG, but the triggers are identical. I'm gonna go ahead and give them a 6 out of 10. I wish there was a trigger lock or stop system and not a little software version. Now I want to talk about how to rebind the rear buttons. The process is pretty quick and easy, but I wanted to make a quick note that the instruction manual stinks pretty bad. It smells like a dock worker's hands. You know how when you get a DoorDash delivery and you're like, yeah, this guy or gal's been delivering all day since before noon. It definitely smells like, you know, a human hands have been all up and down this thing, grubby mitts. But luckily you can rebind the rear buttons too, clicking down the sticks. That's a common question I get. And also menu, view, and share buttons, which you can hardly ever bind rear buttons to the accessory buttons, so that's very interesting. One thing to note, this only stays in remapping mode for 10 seconds, so you gotta be quick on the draw or else put it back in remapping mode. But it really is a typical process we've seen a dozen times before. Go ahead and hold the remapping button, or in this case M for, man, this is a cool controller. Probably stands for mode, but hold that down in combination with the left or right rear button. The status light will begin to flash, and then press the D-pad, face button, whatever you want bound to that rear button, and move on to the next button. The rear buttons have been slightly revised. Shape is identical. However, the surface plastics on your fingers feel a little bit better, and most importantly, they are a lot quieter. So here's the original T4 Kaleid, which had very clicky buttons. Here's the new version. Now, ergonomically, I've always liked the T4 Kaleid buttons, and they transfer over directly to the new version. I do actually prefer the G7 and G7 SE's buttons even more, despite the fact they are smaller. They happen to fall into a perfect place for me. But now that they're quieter, feel a lot more tight and secure while still having pretty much the same exact actuation force, to where previous T4 Kaleid owners moving over to this new Hall effect version aren't going to have a big learning curve because the actuation force feels almost identical, just quieter and better plastics back back here. They took a good 2 rear button system and made it that much better. As for the software program or app for both these controllers, it is GameSir Nexus, which is downloadable on the Microsoft Store. And you can see that listed for both the Flux and the Standard Edition Kaleid. However, currently only the Kaleid with the mechanical face buttons is being recognized in the GameSir Nexus application. Whenever I plug in the Flux capacitor over here, which does have a different PCB, keep in mind it's got that cool little pattern printed on it, hit the home button to fire it up. So in the instruction manual, it mentions holding down mode and then being able to switch through the 4 different profiles, but not any way to switch between different input modes, such as X input, D input, switch input, etc. Switch input wouldn't be here because this is a Xbox and PC controller. So this should be plug and play and X input automatically, as that's been the golden standard on PC for quite some time, and the Flux version is not working for me currently in GameSir Nexus. But one thing I'm really glad to see with these pair of controllers is if you go to the software drop down on their website, you'll see they technically have 3 applications that are still in use. You got the T4K for the original T4, then you got the GameSir Nexus application, which is the one I've done tours or showcases because it has a lot of customization on the PC side of the house. Then you have the GameSir app, which is not Nexus. This is a mobile phone platform on the Apple Store and Google Play. So I'm really glad that these 2 controllers don't use that method. But with this application, you can full screen it, you can pinch and zoom, resize it. Perfect. You have your language in the top right. Mine was defaulted to English. If you click on vibrates, it just vibrates in your hand. Updates, the first thing I recommend you do with a new controller. Then come over here to profile. We are going to adjust profile 1, which you can change the name of over here. We'll make it Tomahawk Deluxe. Hit enter, click configure. So you can control this application with the controller itself, D-pad, thumbsticks, and the face buttons. And you also can use the mouse and keyboard, which is really cool. As is this page, is you have a full-blown diagnostic tool for the thumbstick. So exactly what you're going to get in GPT or Gamepad Tester, hardwaretester.com. And this is freakishly accurate. As you can see, as I move them to and fro and then I stop, they snap back to that perfect resting value. And by default, your minimum dead zone is right here. If you want to knock this down a little bit, you can see these puppies do start wandering a little bit, but that's not drift or anything like that because the default dead zones are right here. Now, if you do want to go for the lowest possible dead zones where you make those finite precise movements, all you got to do is taper up as soon as it starts walking on you when you're not on the thumbsticks anymore. And then you do have raw input mode separated by the left and right analog sticks. What this does, it gives you a little description. Raw mode disables the outer radial dead zone, offering higher precision and speed in some games. True, and I do like the fact that you do have this toggle directly in the manufacturer's software, but me personally, I always leave it off. And if you mess anything up, reset to default, confirm. You have your button bindings over here, which keep in mind you can rebind the 2 rear buttons on the fly. You don't need this program for that, but just clicking on them, psych, not over here. You got to click over there. Then you link it to whatever binding you want. Minimum and maximum squeeze, and you can turn on the hair trigger mode, which keep in mind by holding down the mode button, you can turn that on and off on the fly, which is that software trigger stop mode. You do have full control of all 4 of the vibration motors, 2 in the triggers, 2 in the palms, and full control of your RGB lighting, of course. Getting our first input lag or delay test. It's waiting for 1,000 samples and we're going to give it to them. We're going to get about 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay on our 250 hertz stock clock, minimum and maximum, pretty damn close to each other. No outliers. That's about as clean of a test as you can get. Jitter, that's low. Confirm with Gamepad LA. Yes, indeed. Old school T4 Kaleid. Bring you into the mix real quick. Identical. That's good. All 3 of these models have 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay on a 250 hertz stock clock. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to pop an overclock on that ass in any of these controllers as they are all polling rate locked at the board. Not too detrimental considering 4 milliseconds ain't bad at all. Recently read an article that says around 30 milliseconds is when the human eye starts, we'll say the normal human, the non-gamer, right? The NPC out there in the world can start recognizing about 30 milliseconds of input lag or delay based on things like watching the football game on TV, I guess. And as far as gamers, especially them top tier sweat lords, whether you're flicking the sticks or you're a mouse player, you can definitely notice the chain of input lag or delay between your monitor, your PC or console, and then your input device like your controller or mouse. But 4 is low. It's really low. As for adapter converter support on the PlayStation side of the house, using the Brook Accessories XE2, you are able to go wired and play PS4 games as well as navigate the console with the Flux. However, the standard Kaleid does not work whatsoever. Same exact thing on the Switch, although the lights won't even turn on, so the controller isn't even powered on by the adapter, but it will work with the Flux. So if you're looking for multi-platform support where you can use one controller on Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox, then the Flux is where you're going to look, which is unfortunate because that has the membrane face buttons and the one color lights. So as for the pros, cons, and verdict, it's unfortunately that I can't just say the new version's an absolute upgrade or enhancement over the previous T4 Kaleid, because there are certain parts or components that I think were better on the previous. For example, the Dpad, despite being membrane, not mechanical, felt better. The bumpers, that's personal preference, as I guess all this is, but it felt better on the original T4 Kaleid. The things that truly matter for the long-term reliability, like the thumbsticks, they're now Hall effect. They perform identically to the previous potentiometer modules in the T4, which were some of the best, well-calibrated right out of the box modules. That transfers over directly to the Hall effects, but you have less of a chance of getting stick drift. The rear buttons are also an enhancement. They're much quieter, feel a lot more secure and taut to press. But cosmetically, I think this is a downgrade. It's got that smoked, pretty dark, translucent faceplate as opposed to the fully clear faceplate, which I think looked better, didn't kick back a nasty glare at you. And I think this is just two more models that can kind of confuse customers. The model lineup was already so not just robust, but kind of confusing. And now there's another two models here that I think should have been one controller, a wireless Kaleid Pro with maybe 4 rear buttons and a trigger lock or stop system, a real physical lever you can press, not a software stop system, which is not the same. Furthermore, there's some weird quirks between the two models. For example, the GameSir Nexus application, which does a lot of customization and control for the controller, is only recognizing the Kaleid, not the Flux currently. And for converter or adapter support, it's the exact opposite, where the Flux was recognized by the PlayStation and Switch while the other was not. So my personal recommendation is this: if you do see the T4 Kaleid on a substantial sale, we're talking about $25–$30, then scoop that up, because it's still a great controller, especially if you have a great track record or run of luck with not getting stick drift with controllers, as I do. But if you just don't trust it, you've had too many bad experiences in the past, then pop for the Kaleid. The Flux, I wouldn't even look in its direction, to be 100% honest. But overall, the Kaleid is an upgrade over the original T4, despite the few parts or components I liked from the original more. But it would have been great if this was a wireless version that we were being introduced to. But you don't really see a whole hell of a lot of that on the Xbox side of the house until you start getting into that mid-upper level price point, talking about 180 plus clams, things like the Turtle Beach Stealth Ultra, and of course controllers that start life as a stock Xbox controller and then get customized from the titty nips up. Companies like AIM, Scuff, Battle Beaver, Hex, Mega Mods, etc. The Kaleid family is now a trio, not a lone wolf. These are linked in the description below. Drop in the comment section below what you think of these gamepads, these trollers, if you will, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more stallions and stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.